Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and it is Accountability Hour. I made a tier list predicting where I thought the performance of the specializations were going to be landing, given the changes that we got last week, moving into this reset. So I've got that tier list on the screen right now, and we are going to be reviewing each specialization and moving them around based on my 10-hour playtest yesterday, as well as watching some streams of top-level players and seeing how on the money was I in terms of these specializations and their strengths. And if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So let's talk about Fire Mage here. Fire Mage received some nerfs around its combustion window. I feel like I have noticed Fire Mage not specifically in Solo Shuffle. This is where I think there's going to be a divergence of opinion, and this tier list is going to be focused on Solo Shuffle and for ladder gameplay. When we focus on tournament, it's going to be completely different. I'm going to make a tournament tier list that's separate from this, so I do hope it's important for people to note that. When it comes to ladder, I don't know if I want to say that Fire Mage is still S tier. From what I've seen from it, it seems like it struggles a lot with DPS Hunter specializations, which are doing really well at the moment. DPS Shaman specializations, which are doing also really well at the moment. So I feel like it actually has a lot of lobbies that can be very challenging for it on the ladder because of that. But it still has a phenomenal amount of burst. So this might seem as a surprise, but I'm actually moving it down to A+. I think it's still a really good, solid specialization, but that like little oomph that it had with combustion, I think that's been shaved off a decent amount when it comes to ladder gameplay. Now, obviously in tournament, Rogue Mage, it's going to blast, right? It's probably going to be S tier. That's why I say this is important to delineate the two. Marksmanship Hunter basically didn't even feel the nerfs. It's exactly where I predicted it on S tier. The true shot and the volley windows are the main areas of egregiousness when it comes to the specializations. Damage potential, it just absolutely cranks. And even with the 10% nerf to aim shot, it's still just, even outside of cooldowns, feels very powerful. So the only main issue with it is if you get trained down by like a Death Knight and a lot of melee, although you might have a tough time. But I think that Death Knights might be kind of dialing down a bit in terms of popularity due to some of the other melee specializations getting increasingly strong. But I'm going to leave Marksmanship Hunter on S tier as far as overall ladder performance, and it might even be there on tournament performance. It really kind of depends on if there is any compositions that could make it difficult for it, but its damage is just absolutely out of this world. Windwalker Monk is another one that I predicted onto S tier that I'm going to be leaving on S tier. The specialization just didn't really feel the changes that came into it. It basically offset the nerfs from Rising Sun Kick, putting it into Fist. Similarly with Marksmanship Hunter, shifting some of the damage into Rapid Fire. Didn't really bring their overall like one-shot potential down because the cooldowns specifically weren't targeted. So it's still just an absolute beast. And it got a little bit tankier, although the buffs to Touch of Karma they don't feel really too huge. You can still sometimes get knocked down through Karma, but Windwalker to me is maybe taking the lead for best melee DPS at the moment. Retribution Paladin, another specialization that saw some damage rearrangement, but didn't really lose its burst damage. That's specifically in the Templar tree, focused around Divine Hammers, which is one of the new new hero talents on the right wing at the top. For whatever reason, the Divine Hammers just do disgustingly high amounts of burst damage. Even when you look at the damage meter breakdown, it doesn't come out as a huge percent. It's like 9 or 10%, but when in that window of time, it's like all of the damage that's moving a health bar, and it feels actually a little bit better outside of its cooldowns with the buffs that we saw to Templar's Verdict and Final Verdict. So I honestly don't know if it probably just feels pretty much exactly the same as where it was before, although I do think I want to drop it down from S to A+. One of the main reasons for that is the spell warding change, making the magic bot last less duration. That has been the most notable change that I've seen to Paladins. You don't just get to free walk around immunity to everything, and that can cost you games in wizard situations. So I am dropping Rep Paladin a tiny bit, but not a huge amount. I think it's still phenomenal throughout most of the ladder experience of the game, but I do think something like a Windwalker Monk is starting to edge out more competitively against it. Subtlety Rogue, this is a very tough one because from the rogues that I've seen, it's doing quite a bit less damage, but it still can just stun you every 16 seconds. So it might become a little bit more team dependent, but honestly, given the current meta and how many specializations are capable of just completely 100-0ing somebody, pairing you up with a stun bot is still going to feel really strong. So this is a tough one for me as far as where I want to move it when it comes to the ladder specifically. Again, tournament, Rogue Mage is probably going to be really strong. Maybe there are some counters that are starting to rise up, but I do think tournament setting Rogue Mage is going to be really good. But on the ladder, is it still warranted to be in this S tier position. I feel like I need more time, honestly, with this one. Like play time with it before I really want to move it or not move it. I could see it being somewhere between A+ and S at the moment. I'll leave it on S for now, but I could see it moving to A+. Resto Druid, I think I overshot this one. I was like really on board with thinking like, oh my god, this is going to be insane. But then the day before the patch came live, I was playing it and it was like, regrowth is healing like 2% of someone's health. So like a 40% buff on 2% is like 1% more healing, not massive. The overall healing is definitely increased. It does feel a lot better. I think before I was putting it down at like B or C or something like that. It's definitely a lot better, but I don't know if I want to quite yet commit it to just being the S tier healer. So I'm actually going to drop it down here onto A+. I think it's still really good. Solid option. Has some weaknesses with getting attacked, I think is the main issue at the moment, which is honestly where its weakness probably should lie. So if you're getting too aggressive, too cheeky, too close to combat too often, you get punished for it. But it does seem like it has weaknesses. If something has weaknesses, then I don't think it's kind of deserving necessarily of S tier, even though I just said with marksman, even I don't know if those are necessarily weaknesses. Again, take into account that I'm from the point of view of mastery. So if you've mastered these specializations, this is going to be what they're capable of. If you're a new player to the specialization, you're going to have some pain points on most specializations, ignoring maybe a couple of them, which I can talk about when we get to them. But I'm going to move Resto Druid down onto A+ for now. And we're going to honestly move Mistweaver back up onto S. It does feel weaker with the lower cooldown Life Cocoon, but its overall throughput just feels more solid when it comes to ladder gameplay. You can just actually like move a health bar to full health, whereas pretty much every other healer struggles to get a health bar going, and you just feel like you're permanently between 50 to 80% health, which to be honest, that's where I thought they wanted the healing to be, was you're spending more time between 0 and 100. But with Mistweaver, you do have the powerhouse to actually push through that, which I think gives you a huge edge. I also think the Aura Mastery for your in-cap Song of Chi-Ji is one of the best crowd control combos available in the game. That's not really too easy to punish. And then Fist Weaving is absolutely remarkable still, and adds a lot of extra oomph to a lot of the melee compositions, which a lot more teams are going to be playing when it comes to the ladder. So I am moving Mistweaver onto S tier for now. Unholy DK, I might drop to A. I think Windwalker and Warrior is getting just increasingly more popular, and it absolutely cranks you. So I actually think I'm dropping Unholy DK to A when it comes to ladder gameplay, just because of those counters just being so prevalent at the moment. Feral Druid, good overall damage, hard to play, hard to pull off. So again, if you're not playing this at mastery, it will not feel as good as a Devastation Evoker or a BM Hunter as a beginner. But if you're playing at mastery, I think A+ is still a reasonable location for it. It's not fitting in for the same reasons as some of these other specializations at the top end, but it definitely has the kit that it can perform at this level. Enhance, despite the nerfs to Tempest, still rocking and rolling. I've seen a lot of Stormbringers, much like with Windwalker and Marksman, it's the Ascendance Doomwind's window that does so much damage at the moment. I'd really like to see these classes have their damage shifted a bit more from their cooldowns into their baseline abilities. That way we're not dealing with like the one shots. Can be better for new players coming in that don't recognize those cooldowns and they're instantly evaporated from the arena. And then I think these classes will be more fun to play, because at the higher level, when you pop your cooldowns, people just CC you and run away and you can't do anything, can't end the game. That feels very miserable. So shifting the damage out of the cooldowns helps the bottom end of players and helps the top end of players at the same time. That's why I think it's the wisest move, and they've done a good job with it on a lot of other specializations. So I'm hoping they're not going to give up on that pursuit of taking a bit of power out of the cooldowns and putting into the baseline abilities. But Enhance is in that boat. But regardless, it's still really good. Just absolutely destroys people. BM Hunter, I'm taking a stance here. I'm actually moving it up onto S tier with Marksman. This guy just does so much damage. It's this guy's been flying under the radar, and it's been detected. Okay, BM Hunter has been detected. It is a really strong specialization when it comes to ladder gameplay. It might even be in tournament, but it just does an insane amount of damage. It's very easy to do. Frost Mage, I think I might drop to A. I think that getting attacked can be difficult for you. And with how good hunters are, I think mages are starting to fall off a tiny bit. So do I want to drop you? I might do this. I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to drop you to A tier. I think the prevalence of hunters and DPS shamans is making it harder for mages at the moment, as they're getting better week to week. And I think Frost can have some challenges getting trained, but it is still really good. Devastation Evoker, I'm going to leave on A+. Just much like BM, it's just really straightforward, easy to execute. I think it still has some issues with rogues, and I don't know if rogue popularity is necessarily going to drop off a cliff as a result of the changes, and I think that interaction specifically. But you are getting more viable. I think Demon Hunters and Evokers, you get more viable as Subtlety does get weaker, so you have moved maybe a tiny bit. You'll feel a little bit better than you did last week, but I think A+ is still a reasonable position for you. Shadow Priest is one where I thought that I put it too high. After playing yesterday, I was like, maybe I put Shadow too high on A+. I think Windwalker can be really tough to deal with. There's a lot of high burst melee right now that can just run you over, but you are still the most durable in some cases, I think, out of all the range as far as being able to survive them. So I think A to A+ is still like a reasonable spot. It's mostly just burst. Now the Shadow Word Death buffs, I didn't really notice them like a huge amount. I don't know if I really noticed any of the changes to Shadow. It just felt like it was pretty much the same as it was before. So I don't know if I want to move it from A or A+, or leave it where it is. I think I might just leave it where it is for now, but I could see it being on A. I think melee are just kind of taking over, so I think it makes sense for the tier list to be shifting a lot more melee towards this like upper crust, and ranged more towards the bottom of that crust. Demonology Warlock I think is still really good with lots of CC. May struggle with the Windwalker meta coming up in the mix here, and it might struggle honestly with Arcane, because Arcane got some pretty nasty buffs that some people were telling me about, and maybe it's a real thing, maybe it's not, but I think Demo is still a really good pick when it comes to ladder. Destro is more battlegrounds than arenas. I think Destro and Affliction in that regard are both more battlegrounds than arenas. You just struggle with the DKs and the rogues and just getting run down by a lot of these melee at the moment. I don't know if I want to move Destro similar like Shadow. I feel like we are kind of moving into this like heavy duty melee meta, and I feel like being instant cast like fire, having the freedoms from Devastation is a better spot than where Destro is currently sitting. So again, this is ladder, not tournament. I am gonna drop it down to A, just given I think the shift in the meta. Disc Priest, there's some really high damage builds, so if you can shift knowing when you can free cast to play Void Weaver, you can do like as much DPS as a DPS at the moment, and then you can switch it out of that into Oracle when you know you're going to get attacked. So you've got this nice like mix similar to how Mistweaver has like a caster build and like a fist weaving build. You have that. I think on the ladder, Disc does really well. I think A+ is like more than fair for it as far as its ladder performance. So I'm not going to move it too much. We reviewed these guys. We got Boomkit on A. I think A is still probably the spot for it at the moment. Just good kit overall, but nothing excessive about it. Arcane Mage. Now this guy might be getting pretty crazy, especially as like a lot of these melee DPS get better. I think Arcane is one of the better kind of mage specs for it, but especially if Warlocks don't remain too much meta. But I think the Hunters are kind of keeping you in check. So I think I leave you on A tier for now. But Arcanosphere is something you definitely want to try and press, because it does a lot of damage. It does a lot. Devourer, Demon Hunter, it's getting better. I think, honestly, in 12.0.5, when they introduce some self-healing to your spec, that you might become A+ or S. But right now, I think you're still kind of getting locked down by these rogues, but you do so much damage. Like, the burst window for this spec is, like, probably the highest of any spec in the game. But I still think the rogues, the stunlock burst is going to kind of keep you in line for now. Elemental, I'm also going to still leave on A tier. I don't think it has quite the oomph that a lot of these other specializations towards the top side have. So I'm going to leave Elemental where it was. As far as predictions, I think we landed right on the money with that one. Arms Warrior, I think, is A, but Fury Warrior, I kind of want to bump up to A+. Fury Warrior is just doing so much more damage than Arms. I don't even understand how it's possible, because they actually targeted it for nerfs with the Mountain Thane build, but it just does so much damage. I do think that Fury is kind of creeping up into the ranks here. And then Outlaw Rogue is another one that this might come as a surprise, but I'm actually jumping it up to A+. It does like almost as much as Windwalker damage now. I'm probably going to try to give it a go today, honestly, after what I saw from it yesterday, because I didn't see a lot of rogues up until yesterday. I was like, wait a minute, this is like harder to heal than a Windwalker monk. So I do think Outlaw Rogue is getting very close to possibly taking Subtlety Rogue's position, just like any shift in the frequency of stuns from Subtlety, and I think Outlaw immediately pounces on that position. Survival Hunter, I think A is still probably fair for it. Nothing excessive about it, nothing crazy from it. Prop Paladin actually is jumping up even despite the 10% damage nerf. It just has so many defensive cooldowns and it still does so much damage. Very similar to Marksmanship Hunter. It's just that they nerfed overall damage. They didn't target cooldowns. And it's like Ret. The window is doing damage is the Templar Divine Hammers and their Apex talent. Those two identifying markers is how they're able to like significantly shift a lot of damage. And it's really good just because there's a lot of cooldowns that stop you from dying to one-shots, and a lot of the melee DPS have a lot of one-shots. So it's like really good in the counter meta at the moment, and it has pretty much the strongest 1v1 in the game from my own personal experience. So while the nerf did move it down a little bit, it's not going to move it into an unviable position. I also just wanted to note the Flame Shock Dispel protection on Enhancement and Elemental is actually the most noticeable. I think the Dispel protection there is adding a lot to increasing their overall viability. So dots can't just be like immediately counteracted. And it is increasing their synergy with some other specializations as well that focus around dots. But the burst damage from a lot of these melee is kind of just, I think, over exceeding that, at least when it comes to ladder gameplay. But moving on from Prop Paladin, we get Guardian Druid. I think it still actually is good, although I think Prop Paladin's the best tank specialization, so I think we're just going to leave it here on A tier. Brewmaster is much the same. These three healers are probably the most in contention for me as far as movement from my predictions. Initially, I think that Holy Priest is actually more deserving of a spot up here on A+, and it's one of the best healers to play if you're a beginner. It's just very straightforward and simple, but Holy Priest is actually very viable. It's looking very strong as an option. Holy Paladin, I think, is shifting from melee wings into Herald of the Sun from my experience. When I was playing with the Weapons of Order, it just felt like I couldn't keep up at all and the damage output wasn't there anymore. But then I switched to Herald, it felt better, but it still had some weaknesses and some drawbacks. So I actually think Paladin is kind of starting to slip a tiny bit as far as viability. So I'm going to leave it here on A tier. Preservation Evoker, it's a bit better again because of the Salty Rogue changes, and it might do better because of the melee meta with stacked up classes as opposed to a bunch of ranged DPS that you're chasing around. With ladder gameplay, it's still really good in Battleground Blitz. I think I'll probably leave it here on A tier for those reasons, but these guys have felt the most stable, and then Mystery Reaver I think is still at the top. Affliction Warlock, I kind of want to drop it down to C tier. Now again, much like Destro, it does a lot of damage in Battlegrounds. And you're able to actually free cast there. But in Arena, it feels a lot harder to pull off. I think B tier is still the best that I can do for it. Havoc is doing a bit better. I think I might actually jump this one up to A tier. I think the Silty Rogue nerfs to it are noticeable, but it's still kind of not in the stupendous. I think I have to leave it here because I think DK is better. Still, it is doing better. But I think these one-shot classes are going to keep it in line when it comes to ladder gameplay. Frost DK, I think B tier is still fair. It's still kind of feast or famine. Doesn't feel like it has the same type of bite. I mean, maybe I could put it. Is it equal to Unholy? I don't know. I think I'm just going to leave it here for now. I think my B tier is pretty on point for predictions. Assassination Rogue, similarly, just energy regen is just not great at the moment on it, and it runs out of vanishes. Are the main pain points. Blood Decay, I think, is still right spot. Resto Shaman, I think, is still in the right spot. Like, you can make it work, but it still is the weakest healer in my mind. Could likely use a little bit more buffs towards like its Riptide or its Healing Wave relative to the other healers, because much like I said earlier, like a lot of healers feel like you're just kind of like struggling to keep somebody even above 40% health. Resto Shaman is probably the most egregious of those. Prot Warrior, I think I was right on the money here with C tier as far as overall damage output. Same thing with Vengeance Demon Hunter. And then Og, I left on D tier because I had no idea really where to go with it. And I still have no idea really where to go with it. Usually Og does do well if it ends up being a melee cleave meta though, so maybe it slips through. But I think I'm going to leave it onto the D tier position for now. So do know that this is a tier list that is based on ladder gameplay, no tournament considerations. So no like top 0.1% tournament considerations. I will make a tier list that is focused around that in the future as we're getting closer to the Arena World Championship tournaments. But for now, I wanted to do like a little bit of a ladder update. I think we're shifting to a Zug meta. I think some Warlocks and some Mages are starting to fall off due to the prevalence of Hunters when it comes to ladder gameplay and the burst of Windwalkers and all these other melee. So a little bit of a shift there. The healers did get mixed up. Mistweaver is only slightly edged here into S tier. I do think it's only slightly. One more round of tuning, and I think the healers are going to like condense into a spot where it's like really hard to actually determine which healers are good, which is exactly where they want to be. I think one more tuning pass where they focus on taking damage from cooldowns and putting it into the baseline abilities on the specializations that we talked about. Another round of tuning on bringing Mistweaver throughput down a little bit and maybe focusing some nerfs towards Fistweaver, and then bringing Resto Shaman healing up a little bit, and then maybe bringing up these guys on the B tier also a bit. But also these guys will feel better if the top end classes with their cooldown distribution damage gets redistributed, it'll feel a lot better for them. Those are just my current thoughts at the moment. I will update this as things go on. We'll continue doing the data analysis as always. I do plan on making some guides as well in order to help you guys out in terms of your performance. So thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one.